Okay, this is sort of a Friday tip. What we're going to talk about here is basically want to give you a heads up for those of you who want to dive kind of into the project and are wondering, okay, what am I expecting with regards to kind of moving things around, or how do you keep track of the player's position? So I'm going to show you a quick way to do that, and we'll go to Unity here. All right, so I'm going to go to a blank scene here, so our new scene, right? It has nothing really in it, and I'll even sort of delete everything that's in the scene there. Go ahead. Actually, I guess if I just delete the canvas, it'll delete everything that's on it. Okay, so I'm going to put a simple object into the scene. I'm going to create an empty object. And there it is. It's an empty object, and I can't even see it. Well, that's kind of pain, right, that you can't see it? So why don't we do this, just to make it a little bit easier. And if you have put the Unity package on that I provided, you will have this RPI seal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the RPI seal and drag it into my scene. Now, you notice it's really, really tiny. And that's because I dragged it into some weird place way off into the distance there. If you're not careful, you'll wind up dragging your objects and putting them like somewhere weird. And if you're looking at the canvas, maybe you're zoomed out. So I went ahead, I double clicked on main camera, and then I'll double click on seal, and there's our RPI seal. I dragged that into the scene, and dragging something into the scene from the asset window here, from the project window, will generally create some type of game object to go along with that type of asset. So dragging in a image will create an empty asset that's named the same thing as the image, and will include a sprite renderer on it. Okay, so you'll have a sprite renderer on there. Let's not worry too much about the sprite renderer at the moment. You'll see that it does have the RPI seal on there, and that's all there is to it. We'll leave that just for the moment. Now, what I want to draw your attention to really is this transform. Now, I've mentioned this before, that all game objects have a transform. That's their position in the world. Their position, their orientation or rotation, and their scale in the world. Now you notice you have X, Y, and Z. Okay, so remember those things as well. Those are directions, right? Now a vector, and we're going to get into vectors more in class, but I'm going to give you just, this is the heads up, this is the advanced version, that a vector is something that contains a direction and a magnitude. Okay, so by having an X and a Y component, you can determine you have something that has a direction in the world, right? You may have X equals 1 and Y equals 0. That would have a position or an offset in X and no offset in Y. Now remember, vectors are different from positions in that they are assumed to start at 0 and point in the direction of that magnitude. So this is a little bit, Unity is kind of funny like this. You sort of combine this use of positions and vectors. We'll get more into that in class as well. Again, this is just to kind of give you the heads up on working on your project if you want. So I'm not going to get into all the detail and everything. Try to keep this relatively short. All right, so we have this in the scene, and we're also going to, just to make life easier in the scene, we're going to also create a UI element, and we're going to make a UI element, and it's a button. So if I double click on the canvas now, you'll see, okay, there is the button. And we're just looking at the canvas scale at this point. If I double click the camera, right, it'll show me, zoom me in onto the camera scale, and I'm going to zoom in on the canvas. There we are. All right, so I'm going to use this button to kind of move my RPI seal around. All right, so let's go to the seal, and we will create a component on it. We'll say add component, and that will be a new script called seal controller. Okay, so this is going to control the seal. Now, generally we want classes to begin with a capital, and we're going to use this camel case to kind of break the words into parts here. So seal controller, create and add, and that creates a quick C# script. And it'll take just a second, and I'm going to go ahead and double click on it, and we'll open Visual Studio. Now you'll see that by default it has added a start and an update function. We're not going to really use those because all I want to do is demonstrate to you how to work with that thing, that seal. Okay, so now this is a script that is on the seal. Okay, and that's important because this is a component of the seal object. So if I wanted to, I could just refer to things like by saying transform dot position, and that will give me the transform position, right, that corresponds to the game object that I'm on right now. Okay, transform dot position dot x. You'll notice I can say, okay, refer to the x component, that's thing up here, and so on and so forth. Okay, that should have been small. There we go. Transform dot position. Why does it keep capitalizing here? Let's see, game object dot. Okay. Oh, I know why, because I'm not inside of a function. That's a bad thing. I forgot. I can't just start using stuff in here. This is not a method, not a function. So I need to be inside a method or a function to be accessing an object like that, or accessing a variable. So let's do this. We'll call this public void move seal. And this should be capitalized, move seal. Okay, that's going to make more sense. All right. So every time move seal is called, we're going to want to change the transform. And that means the transform of the object that this component is on. If I wanted to change the transform of another object, I'd have to have some way of referencing that other object. And I might do that by saying, okay, public game object other, for example. And I'm just naming it anything here. And if I do that, transform equals, and I'm going to do something really awful here, new vector 3 vector 3 and I'm going to make it 0 0 0. Okay, so this is going to set my position to 0 0 0 in the world if I say move seal. I'm going to save that function, and let's look at a couple of things that happen. Okay, as I save that, in a second we will see, we come back over to Unity here, that my seal controller now has this reference to the other game object. So if there was another game object in here that I wanted to know where it was, I could drag it into there. So say there was a another game object, or maybe even a audio source in here. I'm going to go to my sounds, and I'm going to put my yay sound and drag it in there. Let's see, go to the camera here. Where's my yay? That's my yay is in a terrible spot. So we'll put it at yay at 0 0 0. And main camera again. So yay is there at the center as well. Let's just put it down there. So yay is a sound object that has nothing on it. But same, I need to refer to that. I could go to my RPI Seal and then drag yay there. And that would give my seal class, my seal controller, a way of referencing that other object. That's all I'm going to say about that for now. So let's go to this now. So now I could actually refer to other. So if I wanted to say other.transform.position, that would be valid, right? So if I needed to find the distance between these two, I could do that, right? This position and that position. You could use that to figure out the distance. That's a hint. Okay. So now move seal. I'm changing seal's position. Now position is a vector 3. A vector 3 has 3 components. It has an x, a y, and a z, right? So we're using a vector to hold a point. A vector is not a point, but they're also made of 3 components like that. So we kind of use them interchangeably. We'll talk more about that. Now, in the case of a position, especially in the case of a position that's part of a transform, you have to change all 3 simultaneously. You can't just say modify just the x value, right? You have to modify all of them. And what do I mean by that? If I try to do this, whoops, Control Z. If I tried to do this copy paste dot x equals 0, you'll notice it gives me a hard time. It gives me this error here. And you'll say, it says, cannot modify the return value of transform position because it is not a variable. Okay, right? I can't just change dot x. I have to change it as a whole, like I did up here. Okay, so the simplest way to move things in Unity is by modifying their transform dot position. Right? So I'm going to go ahead, I've saved this function, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go to my button, and I'm going to attach that code. I'm going to interact with the seal controller, right? So I say plus, and scene, and RPI Seal, and the function I'm going to look at on the seal controller is the move seal. All right? So now we'll press play, go to the game, and I press the button, and nothing really happens, or so you would think. So let's go over here and move the seal. Whoops, not move the camera. Move the seal. So move the seal over to there. And you notice I can actually change things while the game is running. Okay, if I stop, you'll have moved them back. So I just undid what I wanted to do. That's painful, but that's what happens. When you change something while the game is playing, it will change back when you leave. So remember that. But now, just wanted to show you that if I press this button, the seal jumps immediately back to the center because it changes its position to 0, 0. Right? If I wanted to do something more exciting, I might say, okay, seal controller, move seal. I'm going to say seal position plus equals. I could say plus equals, and I'm going to move it in the x direction. Right, so I'm going to move it by 1 in x. I'm going to increment it every time move seal is called. Right, so that's not going to reposition it. It's going to add to that position. Okay, save that. Come back over to my game. Press play.
Yay!
Every time I press the button, the seal moves. It gets incremented. So if we looked at the seal over here, you'd see, okay, it is now 10. I can set that back to 0. And each time I click on it, I'm changing it by 1. Okay, so that's really the first tip I wanted to give you. So how to use scripting to do a simple movement of a game object. Okay, so the game object, which is the RPI Seal, which has that sprite on it, we are modifying its position by adding a vector, a three-dimensional vector, to its position every time the button is pressed. Okay. In other iterations of this game that I've done for other classes, I've made the students actually keep track of the position not in a game object, but just in a raw vector. So this time around, we're going to put things actually use a game object so that we can sort of watch it move around and watch the immediate results. So you guys are getting a little bit more of an advanced version. So if you find any of my old lecture notes, you'll see that this is slightly different now that we're kind of trying to go at a little quicker pace and introduce the concept of game objects directly into here as well, and the interaction of these positions, vectors, and transforms. All right, hope that gave you a little bit of a hint. Until class, enjoy. Have a good weekend. Take care.